One of the first monstrous beasts you'll come across in Ashenfall is the Abyssal Demon. Once rulers of demonkind itself, these monsters have been reduced to hateful shells of their former empire, consumed by an endless desire to inflict suffering on anything unfortunate enough to cross their path. They turn their fury on every living thing, existing for nothing more than to perpetuate suffering. Back in the Second Age, on the mainland of Gielinor, the Majorat Zamorak overthrew his master Zaros and ascended to godhood, marking the start of the Third Age, and eventually the God Wars. This momentous victory wasn't achieved alone. Zamorak forged alliances with many powerful races, including the Avernic demons. In order to secure this alliance, Zamorak made a pact that if Zaros was overthrown, he would help the demons overthrow their own leaders on their homeworld. These leaders were the terrifying race known as the Chthonians. Hopefully I said that right. Some of which are the creatures we know today as Abyssal Demons. With Zamorak's help, the Avernic seized control of Infernus and banished the Chthonians into the Abyss, the strange plane that exists between worlds. But if the Chthonians were banished to the Abyss, how did they end up on Ashenfall? While the Dragonkin have never exactly been known for leaving dangerous things alone. At some point, the Dragonkin somehow managed to summon one, or perhaps several Abyssal Demons into Ashenfall. They imprisoned these demons, sealed them inside one of their vaults. Given everything we know about the Dragonkin, experimentation seems like the obvious reason. They had captured one of the most dangerous creatures imaginable and locked it away to study. For years, the demons remained sealed, until one fateful mistake. Olv the Wild Knight and Ravana the Necromancer, the pair that have had a hand in pretty much half of the history of Ashenfall, explored one of these Dragonkin vaults. Inside, they discovered an imprisoned Abyssal Demon. The pair escaped alive. The demon almost certainly did as well. In fact, considering everything in the lore that we'll cover, it's entirely possible that the vault contained more than one prisoner. Either way, that day inside that vault seems to have unleashed a nightmare upon the continent. The first recorded encounter after this comes from an unnamed dying wild knight found in the Bloodblight Swamp. His final letter describes an enemy unlike anything he had ever faced. It was a monster, a demon, blade-like talons where arms should be, and it arrived in a flash of purple lightning. This wild knight was tracking a fugitive, but instead he found the criminal already being devoured by something far worse. Not a beast, not an animal, something completely alien. A demon. The only reason he survived at all was because the demon had already fed. It was slower than it otherwise would have been. Even then, it drove one of its massive pinchers through his stomach, leaving him mortally wounded. In his final words, he thought only of his fellow wild knights. I pray my siblings do not find it. Sadly, they would. Aiden was a wild knight that was not quite like the other wild knights. Aiden is the talkative kind. He turns solitude into gaseous buildup that he belches upon each of us as an endless stream of words. One day, Aiden and some of his fellow wild knights would go hunting for a monster hiding in the Bloodblight Swamp. During this hunt, they would encounter what is likely the very same Abyssal Demon that killed the wild knight in the previous lore entry. Once the hunt looked hopeless, Aiden decided to stay behind and defend his fellow wild knights so that they could make it out of the swamp alive. Now, his brothers safely out of the swamp, there would be only silence. His brothers mourn him silently. They're alive because he isn't. I think he would prefer to be mourned in sound. It's clear these demons are immensely powerful, besting multiple wild knights with little effort. These nightmarish creatures still roam Ashenfall to this day. However, there are some tales of triumph over these monsters. Her name is in dust, in the wind of history. But there are still creatures that hide in the shadows, afraid of the crack of her whip. Considering abyssal whips are made from the remains of the demons themselves, this tiny snippet of lore allows us to interpret that at least one wild knight has learned how to take these beasts down, and then use their own carcasses against them. In fact, I think I would interpret these lore entries as going something like this. We know the first wild knight went looking for the fugitive in the Bloodblight Swamp, where we know he was mortally wounded and left a note for his fellow brothers in warning. I believe a fellow knight found this note and then rounded up the help of his brothers to go hunt this monstrosity and avenge their comrade. Aiden would be one of these knights that joined the hunt. We know Aiden would die during this hunt, and so that the other knights could escape. I think it would be fitting that one of these knights would be the unnamed female wild knight who would eventually set out to hunt these demons for the rest of her life, and succeeding at least once, killing an abyssal demon and then creating her signature whip out of its remains, using this to hunt down more demons on the continent. Whether or not my interpretation is correct or not, one thing is undeniable. At least one abyssal demon escaped that Dragonkin vault. Probably more. We know of 3 still roaming Ashenfall today, but the existence of the abyssal whip suggests there were once many more. Some were hunted down, some weren't. Even now, centuries later, the abyssal demons still stalk the swamps of Ashenfall, waiting for their next unfortunate soul to wander into the fog. And if the Dragonkin really did imprison more than one, who's to say we found them all?